Picture a hiker crossing a landscape full of steep ravines and long, flat valleys. If every step is the same size, you either bounce wildly off the steep walls or crawl forever across the flats. That's exactly the problem plane gradient descent has when it trains a network. One global step size can't be right for every direction at once. Back around 2012, Geoffrey Hinton floated a fix in a Coursera lecture, and it became one of the most quietly influential optimizers ever built. It's called RMSProp. Here's how it works. Let me frame the shift with one comparison because it's the whole idea in a nutshell. Plane stochastic gradient descent uses a single global learning rate for every parameter in the model. Now, that rate is a compromise. It's too aggressive for steep, noisy directions where the gradient swings hard, and it's far too timid for flat directions where progress is slow and steady. One number can't serve both, so training either overshoots or drags. RMSProp throws out the single number and gives every parameter its own step size, derived from how big that parameter's recent gradients have been. Directions that keep swinging get calmed down. Directions that barely move get relatively bigger steps. Same optimizer, but now the step size adapts to the terrain each weight is actually sitting in. Let me trace a single parameter through an RMSProp update, and the whole mechanism falls into place. First, compute the gradient for this parameter just like ordinary training would. This is the raw signal telling you which way to move and how hard. On its own, it's noisy, and that noise is exactly what plane descent struggles to handle. Then, square that gradient and fold it into a running average. Here the average decays over time, so recent gradients count for a lot and ancient ones fade away. This gives you a live estimate of how large this parameter's gradients have been lately, not forever, just lately. Next, divide the step by the square root of that decaying average. Big, oscillating gradients build a large denominator, so their steps get damped. Small, steady gradients keep a small denominator, so their steps stay comparatively large. The terrain gets smoothed out automatically. Finally, apply that scaled, per parameter update to the weight. Repeat this across every parameter every step, and the optimizer glides through ravines instead of ricocheting off them. Convergence gets faster and a lot more stable. So why did this simple trick stick around and shape everything after it? 3 reasons. Every parameter gets its own adaptive step size, tuned to its recent gradient behavior. That's the core win. You stop forcing steep and flat directions to share one clumsy learning rate. The decaying average of squared gradients is what makes it responsive. Because old gradients fade, the estimate keeps tracking the current shape of the lost surface instead of drowning in history. And it fixed Adagrad's fatal flaw. Adagrad summed all past squared gradients, so its denominator only grew and learning eventually stalled. RMSProp's decaying version stays alive, and it became the direct ancestor of Atom, which just adds momentum on top. Alright, let me leave you with the essentials worth carrying away. RMSProp came from Geoffrey Hinton around 2012 and gives each parameter its own learning rate instead of one global step. That rate comes from a decaying average of each parameter's squared gradients, so noisy directions get damped and quiet ones speed up. It repaired Adagrad's stalling problem by forgetting old gradients, keeping the optimizer responsive throughout training rather than grinding to a halt. And it laid the groundwork for Atom, the optimizer most people reach for today. If you enjoy having these ideas untangled in plain language, Standarity.com has a whole library of them waiting. Come take a look.